Hi yogis, welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a tutorial on an arm balance pose called elephant trunk pose. In Sanskrit, it's called Eka Hasta Bhujasana pose. This is a preparation pose if you're working on 8-angle pose. So before you're able to do that one, you need to be able to master this arm balance. At least that is in my humble opinion. It's also an amazing way to develop the lower belly core strength. So I'm gonna demonstrate the pose first, but when we start to play around with it, I do recommend that you have 2 blocks somewhere within grabbing distance. It is going to make the pose a lot easier. So let me just show you what elephant trunk pose is. I'm gonna turn around to the side. So very simply, you know, as simple as you can make it, elephant trunk pose is this. So picking up the legs and lifting up, having one leg over the shoulder, over the arm, and the other leg extending out. And the reason it's a preparation is that usually for 8-angle pose, you would then cross at the ankle, and then move into your 8-angle pose that way. So I'm not gonna do that one today, but I will show you how to do elephant trunk pose. So obviously the first thing you probably notice from this arm balance pose is that you need to be able to lift your leg up pretty high. So hip and hamstring flexibility is actually required for a pose like this. So if you start sitting with your legs out in front of you, if you bend your right knee and bring the right foot in closer to the groin, you want to be able to do almost like a seated pigeon pose. Some people call this rocking the cradle, where you're catching a hold of your right foot with your left hand and trying to pull that shin in. So if I was to hold onto my shin, I could even wrap around with my arms and interlace the fingers. So rocking the cradle is when you kind of move and wiggle here back and forth. You want to work on being able to lift your chest up, draw the shoulders back down, and then you also want to play with the motion of, can you start to straighten the leg and wiggle the foot a little bit up and down. So this is a great preparation pose. If you found that you were able to wrap your arms around your leg and this feels pretty good, you are now ready to work on the leg placement on the arm. So if I'm holding onto my foot and holding onto my leg here, I'm gonna use my right arm and I'm gonna thread it underneath my right leg. So the point that we're trying to get to is we're trying to lift our right leg as high up the right arm as we possibly can. If you can get your arm to your shoulder, the pose is going to be so easy. It is possible to do elephant trunk pose with a leg that's closer to the forearm. You are still able to pick yourself up that way, but it's gonna be so much harder. You're really going to have to work a lot more at it. So catching a hold of your right foot with your left arm, try to wiggle that leg as close to the shoulder, the bicep, or the upper arm as you possibly can. Once you have that hold, you need to plant your right hand down to the floor somewhere close to your hips. Fingertips are spreading wide. And now I'm holding onto my foot with my right hand, with my left hand, but I'm gonna have to let it go. So you need to contract and engage the hamstrings to keep your leg exactly at the same level as it was at when you were holding onto it physically with your left hand. So squeeze the hamstrings as you wrap it around your right arm, press the right hand down to the mat, keep the leg there, and then bring your left hand beside your left hip. So the further out you have your arms, the harder this is going to be. Walk it back in towards your hips. Once you have this, the easiest way to get started in this pose is to bend your left knee and bring your foot closer into the groin. The further out your legs are, the harder it is to lift the hips. So start by bringing that foot in, press down into the palms, and see if you can just lift your hips off the ground without worrying about what the left leg is doing. If this is really hard, you're gonna have to work here for a little while. If this feels pretty good, then maybe try to float the left foot down or the left foot up for, a second or two. Once you start to feel strong like that, you're gonna do it with the legs straight out. So palms are down beside the hips, right leg is engaged as high up the right shoulder as you can possibly get it. Engage and reach through that left leg, press down through the palms, lift the hips, and then maybe the left heel lifts off the ground. And you really need to keep engaging through that right leg as well. And let it go. Okay, let's release that. Whew. Okay, so one big complaint that I get from students whenever I teach this pose or whenever they try to attempt it themselves Anytime we're trying to pick up our bum from the floor, basically, people feel like their arms are just too short. I hear this all the time, and that's not really possible. So I hate to burst your bubble, but odds are your arms are long enough to be able to lift yourself up. But if your core, if the front abdominals, if the hip flexors are not strong enough, you won't be able to contract and round forward enough to lift yourself up the floor. So if you feel like your arms are too short, a very easy solution and an easy way to work on this is to grab some blocks. So let's do it again. I'm gonna switch to the other side just so I don't work one side more than the other. And we start the same way. So legs out, but this time you're gonna place your block on their lowest level right beside your hips. So basically, instead of having my palms down and trying to lift up from here, I'm gonna put my hands on blocks, and it's gonna make it a lot easier for me to lift my hips up nice and high. All right, same thing as before. Left knee bends, catch a hold of your left foot with your right hand and see if you can lift it up. So you're trying to find that nice range of motion in the hip and in the knee. And once you have that, left arm goes underneath the left leg, and you want to place that leg as far up, as close to the shoulder as you possibly can. Once you have it there, you need to squeeze the hamstrings to make sure your left leg stays in place. And then you're gonna bring your left hand onto your block. Right hand onto your block. Press the palms into the blocks and see if you can just lift your hips off the ground. So this might be enough. You might need to bend your right knee and just work on the lift from here, or you might be able to extend nice and long through your right leg. So even for me, this is so much easier. The block gives you that nice extra height, and you can stay in the pose a little longer. So my arm is kind of sweaty, my leg is kind of falling off there, but hopefully you guys get the gist of it. So that, my friends, is your elephant trunk arm balance pose. I know it is a tricky pose to learn. You really do need to work on your core strength, on your shoulder strength, and you also really need to work at having more wrist flexibility and stability. So for a lot of people, these arm balances demand a lot on our wrists, and I would never want you to injure yourself or to strain yourself just because you are trying to do a cool pose, right? So if you tend to have pain in poses like plank pose, downward dog, side plank, all those kinds of things, you should really work at strengthening the muscles around your arms, around your wrist, around your palms. So my favorite thing to do with this, the best way to practice being nicer and gentler to your wrists is that from tabletop pose, you want to practice pressing down into the fingertips and knuckles and starting to take some of the weight out of the wrists. It's almost like a little suction cup action where I'm lifting up. And this is true even when I'm in down dog, even when I'm in plank pose, if I'm in handstand, crow pose, it doesn't matter. I'm always trying to lighten the amount of pressure I'm putting directly on my wrists, and I'm putting more on my fingertips and knuckles. And then you always want to be doing your stretches for your wrists and for your forearms. So just pulling the fingers back is a really great stretch. You could do it on the mat, palms facing down, fingertips spreading wide. You can do the back of the hands on the ground to stretch more at the top of the forearm. These are all really, really great things to do and work on. Other arm balances like crow pose are going to be your best friend when you're trying to work on these kinds of postures. And another thing that you just want to practice is if you're kneeling, like I'm kneeling right here, having your blocks next to you and working at pushing the hands into the blocks, lifting the knees up and maybe lifting the toes up is going to get you that contracting force in the front body to be able to pick up your hips whenever you need to, whichever arm balance pose you're working on. I hope you guys found this beneficial. As with all arm balancing poses, try not to take it so seriously. Be kind to yourself. You probably won't be able to achieve this overnight, and that's fine. It's no big deal. This is just one more yoga pose. You don't need to be able to do them all. You've got nothing to prove. You know, go into it with a sense of playfulness, a sense of fun, and just keep practicing. Practice regularly, you know, a couple times a week, if not a couple times a day, if it's something you really want to work on. If there's any other arm balance, inversion, or pose that you would like me to break down and give you a tutorial of, please let me know, leave me a comment. I would love to do it for you guys. And if you missed it, I already have a crow pose tutorial on my channel, flying pigeon tutorial, headstand tutorial, and fallen angel as well. So if those are poses that you would like to learn and master, the link to all of those classes will be down below in the description box. Thanks so much, yogis. Please do subscribe to my channel. It helps to support free yoga on the internet, which I think we can all agree is a pretty awesome thing. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.